In 2008, a courageous whistleblower chose to come forward. And he released images taken with the South Pole Telescope, in January of the same year. They clearly show that Sitchin's Nibiru is actually a planet in orbit around a brown dwarf sun. A companion to our own host star, the Sun. So what this means is, what's coming our way is a mini constellation that we now call the Planet X system. The outermost orbital of that system is Nibiru, the planet of crossing. And it has been steadily observed from 3 different surveillance cameras in Costa Rica since 2010. On October 21, 2013, the 00 Skyview team posted a YouTube video entitled "Now Seen in the Western Sky." In this video, they challenged amateur astronomers to make their own observations of Nemesis. All that was needed for the observation was a basic telescope. They made the instructions very simple, for the benefit of non-astrologists as well. They did this by using easily recognizable references to Neptune and Arcturus. They also showed us how the object is moving through the sky, and where they last observed the planets passing. What you see here is what they observed. They provided this image so newbies could recognize what they were looking for when they found it. And here is an enhanced close-up of the object. Admittedly, it is not a delightful viewing experience, like the rings of Saturn, or finding the moons of Jupiter. In observations like this, there is a far more ominous feel about them. And rightfully so. Because it is a brown dwarf star, a sister companion to our own home star, the Sun. Let's take a closer look at Nemesis. Nemesis is a brown dwarf star. It was only in the 1960s that brown dwarfs were first theorized to exist. And at that time they were called black dwarfs. Unlike our Sun, a brown dwarf lacks the mass to sustain a nuclear furnace. So they are by nature very dim, and difficult for astronomers to observe. Also they can be surrounded by what is called a dust disk, as shown in this artist illustration, which makes them even more difficult to observe. Because Nemesis has a known dust disk, it is almost impossible to see it coming. For example, if we were to imagine that we are floating in space, and Nemesis was before us, it would be dark, and surrounded by an ever-shifting dust disk. That would only make it even more difficult to observe, even when sitting right in front of it. This is why Chilean astronomer Carlos Ferrata, the man to theorize about the existence of Nemesis, called it the black star. He called it black, for a good reason. The part of the light spectrum that is visible to the human eye is a narrow band, between the 400 to 700 nanometers range. This is why the Planet X system will need to be much closer to our Sun before it is visible everywhere on the planet. In the meantime, when observed in the infrared spectrum, a brown dwarf like Nemesis will stand out like a sore thumb. Thanks to another courageous whistleblower, known as Nibiru Shock 2012. Do we have infrared observations of both Nemesis and the entire Planet X system? That was taken in January 2008, with the South Pole Telescope. Called the SPT, it is located at the Edmondson Scott South Pole Station, in Antarctica. As you can see in this series of images, we are not looking at a single object, but rather a brown dwarf companion to our own Sun, with its own planets and moons, which is why we call this mini constellation the Planet X system. Also of note, in 2008, another whistleblower, known as DNIR 4808N1, leaked another observation of Nemesis, made with the SPT telescope, in May of that same year. When you put them side by side, it's clear that we have not one, but 2 observations of the same object, taken months apart of each other. In other words, clear confirmation of the Planet X system. Then on December 13, 2013, Richard Bolerup, of Statesville, North Carolina, personally observed and captured this image of Nibiru. After checking Richard's observation against the planet Stellarium, to verify that it was not a catalogued object, such as Venus, and that it was in the proper field of view, it turned out that in fact it was not a catalogued object, and it was also shot in the proper field of view. This placed Richard's first Nibiru observation in or near the constellation Ophiuchus, as spoken about in the Nostradamus Codex. It would seem Nostradamus truly did see, as researchers claim, an object coming from the constellation Ophiuchus. Now we shift our attention to Costa Rica. where we see images taken from the Turrialba volcano, where Planet X was captured on the camera system installed to watch for volcanic activity. If you look closely, you'll see our object of interest. The planet Nibiru. The furthest reaching planet in the Planet X system, which orbits Nemesis, the brown dwarf. The same as what was observed by the OO Skyview team, in October of 2013. There seems to be a lot of confusion about Planet X and Nibiru, because most people do not understand that Nibiru, also known as Planet X, or Hercules, the Red Planet, the Destroyer, Wormwood, and many other names, is the outermost orbital of Nemesis. Therefore Nemesis and Nibiru are part of what we refer to as the Planet X system, a mini constellation in orbit around our own Sun. According to the OO Skyview team, they observed this object on October 2013, which they show tracking from the constellation Aquila to the constellation Ophiuchus, where interestingly enough, the Lost Book of Nostradamus tells us to look for this celestial object. Here we see the spot where the OO Skyview team observed Nemesis on October 21, 2013. Given that Nibiru is the outermost orbital of the Planet X system, this gives you a good idea of how large this mini-constellation really is. Next up, is our January 23, 2014 observation of Nibiru, with the camera system installed on the Turrialba volcano in Costa Rica. We checked this Turrialba observation, with Stellarium, to verify that it was not a catalogued object, such as Venus, and that it was in the proper field of view. And just as expected, it was not a catalogued object, and it was in fact in the proper field of view. With this observation of Nibiru, we find it close to the center of the constellation Ophiuchus. Interestingly enough, Richard Bolerup's January 8, 2014 observation of Nibiru was actually made a few weeks earlier, and it put Nibiru very near the same spot of the observation made on January 23 from the Turrialba telescope. We also checked Richard's second observation, with the Stellarium, to verify that it was not a catalogued object, such as Venus, and that it was in the proper field of view. And once again, it was in fact, not a catalogued object. And it was, in the proper field of view. This image would have been impossible to have hoaxed, given it was observed a week before. In the exact same spot in the sky, the Turrialba telescope observed it, just 1 week later, as it came into view of the camera. As we see in this last image from this dataset, captured on February 12, 2014, again from the Turrialba telescope, we see Nibiru once again in the sky. When adding this location of the observation with the other observations, it seems to indicate a distinct path of the Planet X system. What we are clearly seeing now, through this path of observations, is the suggestion of an elliptical orbit path, as indicated by Zecharia Sitchin, and coming from the same location given by Nostradamus. Is this just one hell of a coincidence? Or is there something more to this? We also would like to note that the placements on this observation sky map do not take into account how these objects are moving through the sky over time, and how they are moving in relationship to each other. So the big question: where is Nibiru now? And when will we see it with our own eyes? This seems to be the million-dollar question, with what may be a $1 million price tag, depending on the value you put on life. Since 2008, when Nibiru Shock 2012 first revealed the true nature of the beast, there have now been countless observations made of Nibiru and the Planet X system. As you can see from this most recent clear image of Nibiru, from 2018, taken from an airplane over Russia, we can see the size of the observed planet is now much larger than the 2013 observations, verifying it indeed is drawing closer to our Sun. Besides the visible observations, we now are starting to see real effects happening on planet Earth as well. It is not difficult to look out the window and realize something is happening to our weather, and our climate as well. The extreme weather phenomenon happening right now worldwide is not going to get any better anytime soon. If anything, this is just the beginning of events to come. Recent news of the magnetic field's rapid movement has raised concerns, and not just to the Planet X crowd. Concerns that Earth is about to undergo a total magnetic pole reversal, in which the north and south poles will fully swap positions, and thus wreak havoc on satellites, power lines, ocean currents, and animal migration, and not to mention human life. Scientists have now openly claimed this could be occurring because of a rogue planet nearing our outer solar system, possibly Planet X, causing a substantial magnetic tilt to not only our home planet Earth, but to all the planets in our system. This information is only as far as a simple search on the subject. Yet, does not seem to be mainstream newsworthy. The last full reversal of the poles took place approximately 780,000 years ago, according to NASA. During a reversal, the magnetic field's shielding ability is weakened, which allows heightened levels of radiation to reach on and above the Earth's surface. If this were to happen today, there would be an increased risk for satellites, planes and ground-based electrical infrastructures. It's also uncertain what impact a full reversal of the magnetic poles would have on humans and other life on the planet. Since the last time this phenomenon occurred, modern humans did not yet exist. In June 2016, researchers discovered a jet stream within Earth's core, where the magnetic field is generated. According to a study on the finding, data showed intense field change at high latitude, which may be part of a longer-term variation causing the planet's magnetic features to move. A global network of ground-based observatories and orbiting satellites have also been analyzing how the magnetic field is changing, which shines more light on how the Earth's liquid core is moving, in conjunction with the magnetic shift they are observing. Scientists are showing a growing concern this recent finding may be the trigger point to the magnetic shift that is now happening, but still have no idea when the lights from the magnetic jet stream first appeared. Or they do know, and simply are not telling us. As the Planet X system draws ever closer to our Sun, all we can do is stay informed.
We have been being bombarded by solar energy waves that are coming from outside of our solar system. Right now, we are expecting 3 separate waves coming this March. Now, the exact dates of these waves are still basically undetermined. I don't believe anybody is giving that number yet. But as they get closer and they become more obvious, I think we will start to hear more, maybe within days before they happen. We'll probably have more information on them. And at that point, hopefully we'll have a better idea of where these waves will impact and exactly what kind of effects we may be seeing from them. Now, these will not be the only impacts that we very well may see in the month of March. There is now information coming out that we have 3 separate clusters of rock and debris that are now being tracked heading towards Earth. Now, word has it that these 3 waves are coming from 3 separate locations, and the Sun very well may absorb one of them, which is a whole nother story in itself, if it does. Now, what makes these debris fields strange, they are coming in a corkscrew rotation, which is causing a lot of problems for our satellites to actually track. It's almost as if they were rotating or orbiting around a larger object, and then that larger object was moved out of the way, causing the Sun to then take over with its gravity, causing the inertia to actually change within these objects. Now, what these will do when they hit, that's the question. Until they do, I guess there's not really an answer to be given other than we may see some interesting phenomenon coming up between now and the 15th of March is what's being said.
In the month of March, when we take a real close look at something, because we have to, there's a small debris problem we have to deal with prior to the 15th of March, right? We actually have very small objects being tracked inbound straight to into the inner solar system. And it looks like Earth is in the target. Now, here's what makes it strange. These things have a corkscrew rotation coming in, so they're not coming in a straight line. That's not what's happening. It's almost as though something very heavy was in between or in the middle of these things, and they were orbiting something. Then that heavy influence was pulled out, which means now the gravitational force of the Sun is altering all those vectors, causing inertia to change within all these objects, but they're probably headed here.
But because they're not headed in a straight line, that is what's causing a problem for our technology here on Earth to actually track them. Our technology isn't made to catch objects that are spinning in a corkscrew type manner. They're just not made to do that.
They're so small and they were moving in such an odd form, right, that some of the software did not really capture them. It wasn't looking for anything that moved like that.
Now, these are being referred to as a pre-cluster event that may hit our atmosphere. These are just a prelim to the actual meteor storm that is coming, and coming very soon.
Let's just say this is a pre-cluster to the actual meteor storm we're going to entertain. We will have a meteor storm, but this cluster came out of nowhere.
Now, according to the reports that are coming in, they are starting to talk about having to evacuate people off of the International Space Station because of these clusters and because of the meteor storm that we are going to see.
The trajectories are beginning to alter, right? Because they're going to have to deal with quite a few things. They're going to have to get people off the International Space Station.
And in case you don't know this already, our defense satellites have been very, very busy lately. They have already been taking objects out of the sky before they actually make impact. And they are doing that using projectile beams.
We have something that's is almost like a projectile beam, you could call it, right? That when it hits an object, that object will explode and it will pulverize that object, right? As soon as it hits the atmosphere, that means most of it turns into ash and it will fall to the earth. Right, so it's just ash. The ash may be of a different nature, but it hits the ash and the ash falls in quite a big area, like West Virginia and Maryland is having right now. White particles are falling all over the place right now as we speak from certain impacts that have taken place over your heads in the daytime. This is very important because in the daytime, if we don't have a clear day, it's very difficult to see any explosions in space. Even when we have a clear day, it's very difficult to see an explosion in space. But I can guarantee you the explosions are happening all the time. There's a buildup of inbounds of both asteroids and other things are starting to build up out there too. In fact, the very nature of what these satellites are doing is spooky on one end, but it's necessary on the other. And people are soon to see all this with their own eye. They won't need an interpreter.
Now, what exactly is in these particles and ash and particulates that are falling from our atmosphere? That's the question. That's the million-dollar question. How are they affecting us and the Earth as this continues to happen?
The problem will be people are going to have to deal with the effects of toxins coming out of the atmosphere. That's going to wipe out quite a few people, and I'll tell you why. Because it says all the green grass was burned up. Right? For all the green grass to burn up, there was a simulation performed on this. In order for all the green grass to burn up, right? Now every landmass does not have grass. In order for all the grass to burn up, you're looking at a major portion. If it all burns, that's an event that is on a scale we've not seen before. So you're looking at it at least, at least, I'd say 1/5 of humanity. These are all the events that you would expect from a very large inbound object, from a secondary star coming into our solar system. These are all the effects you would see. Many meteorites hitting the Earth.
I think what will be interesting about these events will be how the government decides to tell us that they didn't see these things coming, considering a satellite can read the date off a penny sitting on a sidewalk on Earth. But as far as they're concerned, they can't see a balloon in the sky at 35,000 feet.
If something were to come and the government didn't tell anybody, people would be angry unless they believed the government had no ability to see it. Now, how will they convince people that they have no ability to see meteorites coming in? Maybe not being able to spot a balloon. That was highly disturbing to find out that they said to people they did not know what it was. They didn't know what it was or who it was from. That was very disturbing because I know that was a big 100%. That was a 3,000% lie.
Is the position of the balloon classified?
Phil, right now, what we're not going to do is get into a hour-by-hour location of the balloon. Again, we're monitoring it closely. As I mentioned, right now, it's over the center of the continental United States. That's about as specific as I'm going to get.
But I understand it might be inconvenient, but does the public not have a right to know if a balloon
the public
is over
certainly
their state?
has the ability to look up in the sky and see where the balloon is.
Saying they can't track a balloon or they can't tell the identity. Even the balloon that they blew up, that was a civilian balloon. That was purposed. They did that because people instantly began. They can see social media too. Right after they did that, they said, we don't have the systems that everybody said we had, because they can't even shoot down. They shot 2 missiles, not one, at a cost of $532,000 per missile. They shot 2 of them. You dropped a quarter out of an aircraft and they release lock a Patriot missile, it would take that quarter out. Okay, so how could they not hit a balloon? And in the missile systems on an aircraft, right? This is, we're not talking about Vietnam era missile pods. That's not what we're talking about. Guided munitions, right? That will track a target, heat or not, and just kill it. You're not talking about some archaic weapon without guidance, right? These systems have very sophisticated guidance systems on there, and they're equipped with AI. So, but the public bought it, didn't they? Because if people believe that, they're not going to blame the government when a bunch of things fall into their homes and set the grounds on fire. They came out with this UFO disclosure stuff, right? Which was not disclosure. They came out with these reports that didn't pick up the momentum they thought. It just didn't. It was on fire for about, I don't know, a couple days, and then it died down. They're saying because of Christians. Nobody was looking up. Nobody. So this first balloon goes over and people were looking up, but then they instantly stopped. Not a lot of people are looking up. They don't have expectations. All of a sudden, you see a bunch of balloons all over the world flying, right? Guess what happened? After they shot down the second balloon, UFO sightings went up 2,000%. And that means they have people's attention to look up again.
It's almost as if they wanted to create a want for you to look into the sky to see what you could observe. Why would they do that? Why would they want you to be desperately hoping that maybe you would catch something in the sky?
And it's sparking more stories, more this, that, and the other. Now, in the spiritual realm, Satan can't do it. Satan can't do anything. Demons can't do anything unless we empower them to do it. Very real thing. We have to empower. In order for us to empower something like that, or empower Satan to come in our front door, we have to have a desire behind some of his stuff. If a person does not, that's like the Bible says a man is drawn away and tempted of his own lust. So if it's not within us, we're not going to go for it. But if a desire could be created in us to ask questions, to be inquisitive, to want to see him, because that's exactly what's happening now. People say, well, I want to see it. And they have no idea what they're asking, but they want to see it. They want to experience it. And in every single case, they say it's exciting because they don't understand when these things get around, they can jolt your spirit. In other words, they can make you feel, it's almost like a feeling of euphoria, which will lock a person into forever pursuing them. And they won't really pay attention to what they're doing to themselves.
By and large, there are a few things that if you have not lived through, you'll have no context. It'll be like gibberish to you, but many of you have lived through quite a bit, right? And you may be searching for understanding of certain things. Please don't get too distracted by these conventional things that are happening, thinking that we're solely immersed in conventional happenings in these last days. They are going to abruptly change quickly, and but the spiritual component to things, when they begin to manifest, the toll the spiritual realm can take once it begins to manifest is enormous. Some of you guys who are listening to me, you're not thinking about that enough, how much of a toll it can take. Now, some of you have already been immersed into part of the spiritual realm, which has taken a great toll, right? We discussed a couple times about a binary system, right? Did you ever realize that with a return or with the close proximity of another system coming close to us, did you ever entertain that in this other system could be other elements you're going to have to deal with? I'm sorry, there's no one who has a leaked document about this. There's no one who has anything about this and can keep. The only thing you can do with this is discern it. But there are folks who have gathered up warehouses of evidence dealing with this subject because, man, those elitists you guys talk about, they had to know what this was. And the majority of the money has been poured in to know exactly what this was, because whatever this was is coming again, and it's right here in Revelation, because it was also here before. And they will never tell you if something is going to hit the earth. Who would do that? Why in the world would they ever do that? But some of the findings they dig up even to this day, right? Give a clue to it. If you find a clue to that, that's when they come and get you. You'll not hear anybody talking about that because they'll come and get you. They will shut your mouth.
About the eons of time here, making its path. And what I was able to prove that is this object does not really have a stable orbit, and that if you were to pull a set time out of the hat, that the 3,600-year orbit does not apply to this. It would be closer to 360 year.
Really?
And yes, now it doesn't always pass close to Earth. It makes its orbit around the sun. Earth, it's only if Earth is in the same month or zone that it's crossing, because it comes in, let's say at the end of August, circles the sun and exits around March. So if Earth happens to be in those months at the time, then we have some of these major events that's also documented in the Bible and many other cultures. And using this model that the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese astronomers, with this model that we're able to formulate, what's unique about it, that it gave us a 150 to 152 day separation between entry and exit, and both of its path is on the planetary plane of Earth, crossing Earth's path twice. This was quite startling, and actually I wanted to actually reject it or prove it wrong, because when a larger object is on Earth's planetary plane even once, that's something that's very serious. And this object is proving out to be that it crosses Earth's path twice in the same orbit. And so what was the next step was to prove whether or not it was repeatable. This is the orbit that we were able to plot from the data, and and then we also took some of the accounts that were listed in Europe, and but they weren't as accurate as giving us a position in the sky. We pretty much only have like it was in the sky at a certain time and date but the Chinese gave us a lot more data. So whenever we overlay this, it matches the time and place that the European had seen this. And as you can see in this graph right here, you can see how the elliptical orbit is. This green circle here is Earth's orbit, and between this is March and this is the end of August. That's 150 to 152 days separation between. That happens to match some of the stories in the Bible, like in Noah's flood. When it started to rain, it only rained for about 40 days. Then the earth was flooded. And then 150 days later is when there was a great wind, which I believe was a impact blast from another meteor when it crossed the debris field at 150 days later. And that actually knocked off or ejected 71% of our crust from the opposite side. And that's why you have Pangea, where the continents are together at that time, because the crust was holding it as one unit. And then after this blast, which is the Gulf of Mexico is the largest crater on Earth. If you take a look at a map, you can see a lake that's cut in half around near Florida, and a large crater has like a double rim. You can see the second rim off of Florida if you use Google Earth. And if you had the underground topography of the Gulf, I could show you where in the center of the Gulf is a flat plain called the abyssal plain, and in the center of that plain is the Sigbey Knolls. They're I'm not quite sure how wide they are, but at least 60 or so miles across, I would say. And it's an elevated area, like little peaks.
Yeah.
The rest of it around it is a flat plain, which is typical to a crater. Now, the only reason why they want to reject such an impact is because there's two levels of heat with such a large hit. You have the initial blast, and then there's a secondary heat, which is caused by a frequency that it emits that violently carbon molecules vibrate so violently that they spontaneously combust. And you have a ring of fire that will go all the way around the Earth at the time. And that's one of the problems with such a large crater. But if you read the text of the Bible and apply this model to it in science, it actually happened during the second event, when Earth was flooded. You wouldn't have that heat problem because heat is water is a good absorber of heat.
Yeah, I get you.
And therefore, the only way that we can have an impact to create the moon, which they most certainly believe the moon came from the Earth. The Earth doesn't have, the moon doesn't have a core. It doesn't have a magnetic field, but yet the material on the moon is slightly magnetic. And there's found, even some of the samples found that there was iron ore there, rusty. Well, you can't have rust iron unless you have oxygen and water, and to better create the rust.
Yep.
So all of this is absent from the moon, but yet we have evidence that something had taken place. Well, it is required that when it was on the surface of the Earth, and because the moon was not created when the Earth was molten, that's why the moon does not have a core. So it had to be created when the Earth was solid, already in a non-molten state. And this impact explains it. You can't have a moon and still have life if it is impacted when Earth was still solid.
No.
And
Go ahead.
and so there's a logic triangle. You can't have a large impact without a flood for life to exist, and you can't have the moon to exist unless you have a large impact. So you have this logic triangle that one is pointing out to the other.
Now, can I drop in a couple of questions here? How did the moon form into a spheroid like it is? How did it become this round little planetoid thing? Well, it's a moon. It's not a planetoid. It's a moon. And approximately when did this happen, in your estimation, based on what you found?
A German scientist I don't have his name, but a German scientist had calculated that it would roughly take 300 to 400 years for the moon to coalesce into a body, a spherical shape. And as long as you have a large enough piece that has enough gravity is caused by the density of matter. And that would attract the other debris to it. And it would automatically start forming into a spherical shape. Now, if you look at those dark spots, you kind of call it the face of the moon. Those are great caverns. And they're as large as some of our states. And that's because there's missing debris to fill it in. You know, that's thousands of times larger than our Grand Canyon. But that's only there because it's missing. It didn't have enough to fill it in.
And
this is not the only scientific report that I found. Okay, it's there's a scientific report that was developed by UL, a college that's local here. The astrophysicists, there was two of them. One was Matisse, another one was Whitmire. They did a study that showed 30 or 40 different comets, I believe, in their study that the orbits of these comets were warped by unknown gravity that was on the edge of our solar system. And then that was confirmed by a secondary study, which was independent, by the UK. It pointed to the same area of space, Sagittarius. The Chinese, the data right now, if it's going to come back again around, it's going to come out of the constellation Sagittarius, and it's going to come from the ecliptic, which is on the planetary plane of Earth. And now, if we also take into account when we, one of the things that I came across accidentally was when I did the model and I picked a certain date and I reversed the model in time to 1992, where the Voyager and Pioneer probes were, that this is the same area of space that NASA placed the Voyager and Pioneer probes. Now, what are the odds of that? You can see in the center right here that green line that arcs across the center is the ecliptic. You have the Pioneer 11 here. At the bottom, you have the Pioneer 2, and they have another Voyager 1 at the top up here. They are triangulating to figure out the position. In 1992, that was about 8 years outside of our solar system. Now, what's interesting, the way this turned out, it's exact. If you look at the Pioneer and the Voyager probe right here, you see how I drew a circle using where planet is. They're exactly the same distance apart from the planet with the same angle. What are the odds of that? We have a real object that's entering our system, and that's why we're having all of these effects of earthquake. Now, from right here, this is 8 years out of our solar system. That meant it entered our solar system around year 2000. That had been around on Neptune's orbit. And according to the software, using Kepler's laws of planetary motion, and we're going with an object same density as Earth, but much larger, between 6.5 to 7.5 times the diameter of Earth.
Yeah.
And we allow in Kepler's laws of planetary motion, according to the model, and says from the edge of our universe it takes 16 years to reach us. Well, that's about 2016. So if you look at the escalation of earthquakes and volcanoes, the magnetic field of the Earth changing, the sun's activity, the heating up of planets, and it goes on and on, the birds and fish kills.
Yeah.
The weird weather patterns. This is exactly what we would expect of an inbound planet. And we would see it more intense as it's getting closer. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The Bible actually says that it's similar to the pains of a woman giving birth. It will escalate in that manner.
Well, I think we've all figured out by now that the government's not going to say, okay, people, we're going to give you the heads up on something bad that's about to happen. They're not going to say a thing. They're not going to say anything.
Exactly.
They've never said anything.
Doesn't that kind of match the profile that the Bible says? Prior to its arrival, you'd see the earthquakes rise like the pains of a woman giving birth, and that's exact. And that this they had stopped updating the information in 2007, and we are getting more earthquakes in one day than the pre-28 day moon, something like that. And so I'm looking for a third object that would eclipse the sun, because the moon is not involved. You cannot have a crescent moon involved with a solar eclipse. It's only a new moon that's able to do it. Crescent moon cannot do it. So when I identified these outer constellations, which is Gemini and Capricorn, and Pleiades in the middle from Germany, I was able to say that this was the month of March and April. Then when I noticed that you cannot see this constellation, Orion, from Germany at that latitude, the only way that you can see this is if you had a latitude of Luxor, Egypt. You see this red line here is the latitude of Germany. If you go to this blue line, that's Luxor, Egypt. And that's a tilt of 26 to 28 degrees, which has happened multiple times in the Bible. And when we look for this certain pattern with you see how the moon has a crescent here? This is the pattern of the planets. And we put a third object, eclipsing the sun, which gives you about a 3-hour eclipse. The software gives us April 6th of 1810 BC. They don't compensate in the software where the calendar year changed from 360 to 365 and a quarter days. That happened around 700 BC during Hezekiah's time. This happened globally because it's documented by almost every civilization on Earth that had a calendar. Their calendar prior to 700 BC was 360-day year. So whenever you subtract the difference of 16 years, you end up with April 6, 1794, when this happened. And this was the same time period as Joseph of Egypt, documented by the German astronomers. That proves to us that Joseph's dream, remember,
yes,
where he had a dream that the stars bowed to him. That was Leo. 11 stars was Leo, and the moon. Now, keep in mind, it says the moon and the sun. Well, you can't see the stars if the sun's out, so that word sun actually is illuminated body. It was this planet that he actually saw. Because he said illuminated body, the moon, and the stars. Because once you said stars, you can't see stars if the sun is out. And so it actually, when the earth tilted 26 to 28, the heavens bowed to him, just as this text says. That's a real event. And the 7-year drought was correct. You had 3.5-year drought coming in, and 3.5-year drought as it left. So midway through the drought is this date right here given by the Niebuhr disk. We can date the actual event. This object, this is the ancient observatory, which is about 20 miles where this was found. This is Gothic Germany. This is the viewpoint of it. You see this old riverbed right here,
yep,
where they had changed the river to better put a dam here, and that's shown on the disc. You see this bottom curvature right here.
Yes,
that's the riverbank. You see in front of the observer.
Excellent.
So all of this is proving out, and here's an example also on what we're looking at. This is the latitude of Gothic Germany when it moved 26 to 28 degrees, and then if Joseph was in Egypt, he would have moved closer to the equator at the time. And of course the Earth corrects itself after that, because it's like when two planets are passing close to each other like this, it's like two magnets, two bar magnets. The opposite poles are attracting to each other, and it causes us to tilt. And this happened before. Now after this event happened, we had the Exodus. Now that's what's interesting about this. This is where we can prove that it doesn't have it doesn't necessarily have a stable orbit, because we have items that it's able to collide with, like moons and planets and such. We have Pluto on outer edges that's at a very strange extreme tilt, and it used to be a moon to Neptune, is a common knowledge to that. So what hit it or bumped it to give it this extreme elliptical orbit at a steep angle? This was this particular planet is able to explain many of the anomalies we see in our universe.
Up in the magnetosphere, the layer of the Earth's atmosphere which reflects solar particles. Although the phenomenon is relatively common, it occurred just as Earth was being bombarded by a solar storm. The website, Space Weather stated, the crack developed on February 3rd, when the interplanetary magnetic field near Earth tilted south. This partially cancelled our planet's north-pointing magnetic field, creating a gap through which solar wind could flow, bringing a stream of radioactive particles as well. Auroras, which include northern lights, aurora borealis, the southern lights, and aurora australis. These are all caused when solar particles hit the atmosphere. As the magnetosphere gets bombarded by solar winds, stunning blue lights can appear, as that layer of the atmosphere deflects the particles. However, researchers also note, the consequences of these solar storms can extend beyond just the light show of the northern or southern lights. For the most part, the Earth's magnetic field protects humans from this bombardment of radiation. But sometimes, this is not the case. When it comes to recognizing these effects, sometimes the effects on satellite-based technology and power grids are our first real posted notices. So what happens to our atmosphere when this occurs? First, the solar winds begin to heat the Earth's outer atmosphere, causing it to expand. This can affect satellites in orbit, potentially leading to a lack of GPS navigation, mobile phone signal disruption, and satellite TV interference. When the particles in cosmic rays collide with the atoms at the top of the atmosphere, they burst, tearing apart the atoms in a violent collision. The particles from that explosion then keep bursting apart other bits of matter in a snowballing chain reaction. Some of these charged atomic particles rain down over the Earth's surface. And that includes raining down on you as well. Additionally, a surge of these charged particles can lead to higher than normal currents in the magnetosphere, which can lead to higher than normal electricity flowing through our power lines, resulting in electrical transformers and power station blowouts, causing the loss of power for hundreds, if not thousands. Events like this have happened in the past, with the biggest technology-crippling solar storm coming in 1859. During that storm, a surge in electricity during what is now known as the Carrington event was so strong, telegraph systems went down all across Europe. There are also reports that some buildings spontaneously caught fire as a result of the electrical surge. However, a recent study has found that these solar storms are expected to arrive every 25 years on average. Meaning, we are well overdue for more. Research from the University of Warwick and the British Antarctic Survey analysed the last 14 solar cycles dating back 150 years. The analysis showed severe magnetic storms occurred in 42 out of the last 150 years. And the great superstorms occurred in 6 years out of 150. Lead author, Professor Sandra Chapman, from the University of Warwick's Centre for Fusion, Space, and Astrophysics, said, "These superstorms are rare events, but estimating their chance of occurrence is an important part of planning the level of mitigation needed to protect critical national infrastructure." This research proposes a new method to approach historical data, to provide a better picture of the chance of occurrence of superstorms, and what superstorm activity we are likely to see in the future. As this cosmic radiation continues to breach our atmosphere, the question of the effects on humans becomes even greater. While movies and the media go out of their way to minimize the threat of cosmic space radiation, the threat is very real when it comes to human exposure. This is why airline pilots and stewardesses have a much higher chance of getting cancer than other professions.
You both good luck. We're all counting on you.
The closer you are to space, the closer you are to being exposed to cosmic radiation. The Earth's atmosphere and magnetic field largely protect life on the planet from cosmic radiation. When astronauts travel beyond that protective bubble, energetic particles called galactic cosmic rays bombard their bodies. Galactic cosmic rays are thought to be the remnants of supernovae, and contribute to the space radiation environment, along with protons and helium